Happy Friday to everybody. We've reached the end of a working week once again, and where the heck do we start? It is busy out there. We've got the record-breaking cold, we've got record-breaking heat, we've got a change in the pattern, and in today's video I want to build a case that promotes another spell of cold Arctic air into the pattern, possibly into the early stages of October, and I'll get to that in just a second. But let's look at what is coming up this weekend. We've got the Tropical Outlook tomorrow, and we will have the live stream, as always, at 4 p.m. coming live from Inverness this weekend. So I hope you can join me for that. I will leave a link in the description below today's video for the live stream on Sunday. So that's 4 p.m. this Sunday. We'll be talking all things global as well as local. So this is the overview, precipitation, cloud, temperature and pressure chart. And you can see a change now taking place over Western Europe. We'll look at cold and the snow that we've seen in recent days in a second or two. But that Arctic air has been driving southwards over the last, pretty much the majority of this working week. We've had cold originating from the Baffin Straits, Greenland and the Arctic, and driven south over the UK and Ireland here. Some of the coldest temperatures in several years across parts of the UK. As cold as, you have to go all the way back to 2010, the last time the Republic of Ireland had as cold of a morning as we've seen this morning. And the cold days, cold afternoons and evenings has been the story. But the epic snowfall across the very areas that seen upper 20s, low 30s last week. This very day last week, in fact, Upper Austria seen 32 Celsius. Upper Austria this afternoon has seen upwards of 50 centimetres of snowfall, blizzard conditions in the mid to upper Alps. And now we are starting to see the scene set for what could be a very, very problematic weekend to come in parts of Central and Eastern Europe here. As cold air drives south, we've got warm, humid air residing over southeastern Europe. We've got a 28 Celsius Mediterranean. So lots of warm, moist air to get lifted into that system. And then with the kind of stalled out nature of that, trapped beneath high pressure, and we'll look at the upper levels in a second, this system is going to just dump rain with potential epic proportions here. Devastating floods is on the table with this, by the way, and I've been making mention of this for several days here on the channel. But you can see the change for the UK and Western Europe as the cold air has driven south. We've now cut off the supply of cold from the north. Higher pressure is building in, and the winds are now starting to turn more west to southwesterly. So we're seeing a recovery in the temperatures over the UK and Ireland here. And one of the main factors is the high is shifting to the south. The low is now starting to regain position up towards Iceland and Scotland. And therefore, we're going to see frontal systems moving in to the northwest over the course of the weekend here. Lighter winds underneath the high itself means it should be fairly decent across the bulk of England and Wales. We're going to start to see the temperatures creep back into the 20s once again after a few chilly days. And you can see here as we progress through the course of tomorrow. This is off the GFS, by the way. You can see that frontal system attached to that low, 99 millibars just to the south of Iceland here. There's that high now building in. But you notice here we've got this squeeze in the pressure field here, area of low pressure. We've got high pressure. We've got an ingestion of that warm, humid air from the Mediterranean here. We've got this clash between warm and humid and cold and dry. And then right on that boundary itself, which becomes stuck, anchored in place through the weekend and into early next week, this is where we're going to see upwards of 200 to 400 millimeters of rain. I'll repeat that, 200 to 400 millimeters of rain falling in an area that is very, very dry as well. You can see here that feature looks as if it's going to just maintain itself. But then you notice here that we have high pressure building over the north, central and northern areas of the UK as we progress through the early and middle portions of next week. So that's the overall story. Cooler, more unsettled the further north you go, warmer, drier, and more settled the further south you go. That's over the UK I'm talking about here. And then high pressure, like I say, builds in. So this is the upcoming 5-day period off the GFS ensemble. And you can see the high over low situation here. Very similar idea to what we had back at the end of last week when we had temperatures as high as 27 Celsius in parts of the UK. And we had the cut-off low, remember, down to the south. Very heavy rainfall along the southern flank of the UK here. And essentially what we've got is a very similar situation developed now. The difference is that that cut-off low divorced from the jet is going to be stuck right over the Balkan region, Italy, and adjacent countries here. And therefore, we're going to see very significant amounts of rainfall. So I made mention of building a case with regards to a cold pattern developing again. And repeating patterns is something. This is kind of going to have a similar flavour to what we've seen back last autumn and indeed winter. I'm building a case here, folks, with regards to the potential of a cold December coming up. One thing I want to point out is the La Nina continues to strengthen in the Pacific. And essentially, you could ask yourself the question, why have we seen this cold spell already? It's came early, as we know. And I think part of the reason for that, this change to blockier weather, to more outbreaks of cold into North America and Europe, heat going north, very, very meridional, wavy type of pattern developed here after what was a record strong positive North Atlantic oscillation, very, very westerly Atlantic driven. It's not the case now. And I think the reasons for this is down to the SOI, or the Southern Oscillation Index. When the SOI is reflective of El Nino, it's in negative, and we've seen that back during the month of August. We've seen this negative SOI value here, which means the atmosphere is more responsive of an El Nino as opposed to La Nina. Then, as we've seen a change taking place mid to late August into the first week of September, we've seen the SOI going quite firmly into positive territory, which means that the atmosphere is beginning to respond to those cooling waters over the central and eastern Pacific Ocean. And what that could suggest to me would be that we're slowing down the westerly flow within the northern latitudes and allowing a lot of heat that's trapped within the mid-latitude pattern, record heat in North America, record heat in Europe, record heat Middle East and Asia and the Far East. That heat has been kind of trapped in place over the mid-latitude belt of the Northern Hemisphere. Once the SOI, the Southern Oscillation Index, has went from negative El Nino to more La Nina, what essentially La Nina does to the atmosphere is it starts to slow down the westerly flow. It starts to steal momentum from the westerly flow. And by stealing momentum, it slows down the westerlies and it allows the opportunity for heat to then get transferred from the subtropics up into the high latitudes. And I think that is the reason behind the cold spell that we've now seen develop here. This is the North Atlantic Oscillation. You can see it going into negative. It's climbing back towards neutral, if you notice, but it's expected to then go back negative. If we look at the Arctic Oscillation, which is actually more important, you can see that it was firmly positive. At the time, the SOI was starting to transition from negative to positive. And in my understanding, that is stealing momentum from the westerly flow and allowing the heat that is trapped within the mid-latitudes to lift north up into the high latitudes. And by doing so, it's then reversing the pressure pattern, the pressure field over the Arctic region. And you can see the response here, the negative Arctic Oscillation, going quite deeply negative if you notice as well. This is the first time we've seen such a deep negative AO in quite some time. But this to me anyway, is the reasons behind this. I want to take this further though, by looking at a few other aspects to consider. So I just want to quickly touch on this. What is the Arctic Oscillation and North Atlantic Oscillation? Well, let's have a very, very quick look at that. This is a nice visual here representing the Arctic Oscillation here. When it is strongly positive, let's blow this up so you can see it. When it is strongly positive, we then allow the cold to build and strengthen over the Arctic region itself. That then means we've got strong westerly flow, westerly momentum, separating the Arctic air from the north and the warm subtropical air from the south here. We've got a straight, flat, zonal flow. This is actually what we've seen back in August. Strong westerly flow, meaning we had a lot of Atlantic influence, particularly across the northern UK. We had stronger, higher pressure to the south here, so we were warmer and drier the further south you go. Europe was very warm as well, but generally all the cold air is kind of confined to the Arctic with a strong belt of polar jet stream winds. When the Arctic oscillation is negative, and we have that now, then it allows the opportunity for warmer air to move north. We slow down the westerlies and we allow that warmer air to then lift north. And by doing so, we're building pressure over the Arctic. By building pressure over the Arctic, we're then releasing the cold over the Arctic southwards. What's the North Atlantic Oscillation? It's a measure of pressure between Iceland and the Azores. And you can see here that a strong positive North Atlantic Oscillation means it's very similar to the Arctic Oscillation. We've got this belt of strong westerly winds, Atlantic-driven, mild conditions. When the North Atlantic Oscillation is negative, we then allow pressure to build to the north and cold to drive to the south here. This doesn't always guarantee Western Europe gets cold, by the way. I have to emphasize that point. But you can hopefully get the overall understanding here of the positive and negative of both the Arctic and the North Atlantic Oscillation. Now, there's been strange things going on within the Arctic itself. Let's very quickly look at the snow depth chart. This is now, and this is what's expected by the time we reach Saturday the 28th of September. So you can start to see the snow expanding over parts of Siberia and parts of China as well. So you can play through this loop here. You can see the snow expanded, seen by the GFS model here over the next couple of weeks. But I made mention of the what could allow the Arctic Oscillation to go negative in the first place. Well, if we look at 10 millibars here, and you can see here that we've got the cold starting to gather over the Arctic. This is the 10 millibars, so this is way up at the very top of the stratosphere. And you can see naturally at this time of the year the cold building. Days are becoming very, very short. Nights becoming very long. The cold builds over the top of the pole. And you can see that happening. This is a natural occurrence that happens every year, especially during the month of September. But I want to draw your attention to the warming that takes place between Asia, and then it pushes towards the pole. Right at the very end of the loop, you can see here the warming and the kind of pressure being alluded to against the polar vortex, this gathering strength that's only in its kind of development stage. But you can see already that there is pressure being put on the polar vortex. And by doing so, this is actually filtering down through the stratosphere into the troposphere. And this is a chart here of the GFS ensemble representing the GFS, the polar cap height. So essentially this is your polar cap. This is over the North Pole. And you can see here we've got the cold layers up at the very top of the stratosphere. Then down at the 10 millibar level, we've got warming taking place. So we've got positive heights. And then as we go down towards the troposphere, you see these blues representing low pressure. But you notice something here. As we've progressed through the month of August, we've had this warming within the kind of 5 to 100 millibar level within the atmosphere. This is way up in the high levels of the atmosphere. And then you've got these low heights down in the lower levels within the troposphere. That represents a positive Arctic oscillation, which means we've got the cold generally collected up towards the Arctic, strong westerly winds, mild conditions within the middle latitudes. But notice here that we start to see the descent of some of this warmer stronger pressure descending down through the troposphere, and that essentially has allowed the Arctic Oscillation and North Atlantic Oscillation to go negative. So you can see that taking place here in the time frame just as we began the month of September here, which means that this correlates very nicely to this, the Arctic Oscillation going negative. Once you start to see the pressure building within the stratosphere down into the troposphere, you've seen the response within the Arctic region here. So this is the reasons behind the cold that we've seen so far. Let's take it further than that though. I want to talk a little bit about the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and I want to show you this chart. Now this chart here may be a little bit hard to understand, but this is of the ECMWF. It's a couple of charts that I've not shown you before, and I want to show you the time frame here. So we're essentially in the day 1 through 5. The purple colors represent day 5 in the Madden-Julian Oscillation. So we've been in a strong phase 4 and 5, which back last week promoted warmth over the eastern United States and Western Europe. Then we've seen the obviously the Arctic Oscillation, North Atlantic Oscillation going negative. I think the SOI has a lot to do with that. But I want to show you something here. What does this actually mean? It means it's enhanced convection over the maritime continent, essentially between Australia and Southeast Asia. That is where you've got the enhanced convection, and that has an influence further north, away from the tropics. So this is a tropical teleconnection that can quite often have significant influences around the planet. And with a strong phase 4-5, which is over the maritime continent, tends to promote stronger pressure and warmer conditions over eastern North America, Western Europe. But it's expected, according to the ECMWF, and this is the reason why I think we're going to start to see the potential growing for another Arctic outbreak into Europe, into North America, is if this MJO, notice here that the orangey colours represent day 10, and then day 15 is the blues. So it's expected, according to the ECMWF, to rotate from phases 5 into phases 6. Phase 6, by the way, promotes blocking over Europe. And that's exactly what we're seeing here at the moment. We've seen the warmth last week, phase 5. Then we're seeing the strengthening of the high pressure, especially across more northern areas of Europe, I must admit. Not bang slap over the UK, but we are going to see that over the next weekend or so. But we're expecting the MJO to rotate from phases 6 in the day 5 into phases 7 by day 10. Then rotate into phases 8 and into 1. That's day 15, and towards day 20, that would be in the phases 2 and 3. What do these phases correlate to? If we look at this chart here, you can see what these various phases suggest. So phase 4 and 5 is over the maritime continent. So that's the enhanced convection, thunderstorm activity over this region, promotes warmth over eastern North America and warmth over Western Europe. Then we're entering into phases 5 and 6. So the pulse of convection is now moving into the West Pacific. That promotes high pressure over Europe, high pressure over eastern North America. But it's expected to continue moving towards the date line, phases 7 into 8 into 1. And what this correlates to, and it's not always a perfect science, by the way. So there's your phase 6, blocking high over Europe and the UK. Into phases 7, into phases 8. Northerly block, negative North Atlantic Oscillation, cold UK. This would be especially so in the winter time. Remember, we're only in September, October, so obviously you have to take that into consideration. That is one reason. The Madden-Julian Oscillation moving through the Pacific towards the North Atlantic over the next 10 to 15 days into possibly day 20. That is one thing that would promote this. Keeping the Arctic Oscillation, North Atlantic Oscillation negative would be the fact that we have a weaker than normal polar vortex. So that in itself has a slowing down process within the westerly flow. Have the MJO rotating through the warm phases into the cold phases is one thing. Also, the tropics. That's another thing that we need to look into and take into account as well. This is also off the ECMWF, by the way. And this is the probability of tropical activity within the Atlantic Basin. Remember last year, we had not only the MJO rotating into the cold phases, but we've also seen a lot of tropical systems recurve from the tropics up into the temperate region, up into the mid to high latitudes. And what this is essentially suggesting to me is that, see this here area between the Monday the 16th and Monday the 23rd of September, this would suggest to me that we're going to see systems trying to move out of the tropics up into the mid-latitudes. This is transferring heat out of the tropics and moving it towards the pole here. Skipping further forward here, this is Monday the 23rd through Monday the 30th. And you can see here that the probability increasing of systems moving up into the mid-latitude pattern. What does that all mean? I think, anyway, it helps build pressure from the mid-latitudes up towards the pole, and therefore it reinforces the negative Arctic oscillation, North Atlantic oscillation, and in turn then tries to promote colder outbreaks. This is off the GFS, by the way, and this is the period between the 16th and the 21st of September. Remember, there's also a lag as well, by the way, that also has to get taken into account. Hence why I think we may see something towards the early to mid portions of October. Wouldn't be surprised if we see what we've just seen repeat itself then. So you can see here as we play towards the period 18th through the 23rd, notice here that the pressure is quite strong, but it's further north up towards the high latitudes here. Then we continue to play through this loop. We maintain this kind of blocky, slow westerly flow, warmth lifting north, cold lifting south, and you've got this general idea that there is several factors getting taken into consideration here that would promote the possibility of cold later down the road. Now, even if we don't get necessarily a lot of cold, even with this next potential Arctic outbreak, the thing is, it's understanding what the pattern is trying to tell us, repeating patterns. We've seen it already. We're likely to see it again. We throw the tropics into the mix, which I don't think has really been involved. The MJO and the tropics haven't really been the reason behind this cold spell that we've seen just happen now. I think it's more the switch between the negative to the more positive SOI. But watch this space. I might not necessarily be correct completely with this, but do you understand where I'm coming from with this? So the MJO expected to go into the colder phases of 7, 8, and 1 over the next 20 days or so. The tropics are likely to become more active, releasing heat out of the tropics and moving it towards the pole as well. And obviously we've got the weakness in the polar vortex as well. All these factors have to get taken into consideration with regards to the overall pattern here. But it's a high over low situation, major flood situation expected over Europe in the coming days. And here's a tweet here by Met Ryan from a few days ago, saying an interesting combination of solar maximum, westerly QBO, and weak La Nina developing going into winter. Some of the model is suggesting more east-based Nina. This is what cold fans need. An east-based Nina favours a negative NAO with a west QBO and a solar maximum. I have to be honest with you, I was incorrect. I had said that an east-based QBO, Nino, could promote milder conditions, but I actually was incorrect, because I said warmer water over towards the Central Pacific would be more of a factor to promote blocking negative Arctic oscillation, North Atlantic oscillation, etc., etc. But actually an east-based La Nina coupled with a westerly QBO, which is the wind within the stratosphere, and the solar maximum that we've got at the moment, tends to promote a more negative North Atlantic Oscillation winter. So this is winter we're talking about here. This is me setting stage for winter itself. What we're seeing at the moment and over the next few couple of weeks, 3 weeks or so, 4 weeks even, could have significant influences as we move towards the early portions of the winter here. A good MJO wave going through the Maritimes into the Pacific is often behind UK cold spells. So this is essentially backing up what I'd said. The MJO is expected to rotate through phases 7, 8, and 1, according to the ECMWF, over the next 20 days or so. Coupled with a weak polar vortex, the likelihood of a negative Arctic oscillation, North Atlantic oscillation, increases our chances of seeing cold very end of September at the earliest, but more likely early in mid-October. Research suggests that a La Nina West QBO leads to a weaker MJO progression here, which would be a negative for cold winter fans. However, if the La Nina is more east-based, this could swing the pendulum back the other way. This is one to watch through autumn. We do have some MJO activity in the Pacific at the moment, so eyes on the next orbit late October. This will give us a clue as to how it's looking. So this is building the overall ideas here with regards to the potential for cold. Let's anyway move on. This is some of the cold that we've seen, record cold by the way. We've seen it over the UK, we've seen it over parts of Ireland, into France. Over the last 24 hours or so, it's been down towards Central and Southern Europe. So you can see here, Piena Rosa, minus 11 Celsius was recorded this morning. A near daily record. Low records go back to 47 years. The record is minus 12.2, so a very, very cold minus 11 in the upper levels of the Italian Alps. We're also seeing Monte Simone down to 0 Celsius this morning, and that was a tie of a daily record low. Had other records fallen as well in parts of Hungary, but then further east, as the winds continue to blow south, we've seen records fall all the way up towards the Arctic. We've seen a temperature of 17 Celsius, a near daily record high minimum. This is way up into Arctic Norway. So a lot of cold records over Western Europe in recent days, a lot of heat records over Eastern Europe in recent days. Let's have a look and take a quick tour as to what's been going on with regards to the temperatures. Looking at Shrine Bruin's tweet, looks like Mount Dillon had an air frost this morning, -1, which makes it the earliest air frost in the Republic of Ireland since 2010, which occurred back on the 30th at the same station. Catesbridge this morning was down to a chilly -1.4 Celsius. We'll look at the tropics in tomorrow's video. This is an interesting one here. A part of the Austrian Alps at an elevation of 864 meters. The first time since measurements began back in 1948 was seen snow cover in September in this one particular location in the Austrian Alps. So that was the scene earlier this morning here. Moving on, this is a tweet here by JW saying that yesterday, the 12th of September, was even more remarkable with a CET of 9.4 Celsius. It was the coolest day in the first half of September since 1986 and the coolest for the date since 1908. So the CET for the first half of September was the lowest yesterday at 9.4 since 1986. So there you go. Interesting stuff indeed. Exceptional low temperatures at high elevations in France. This is a tweet here by Thierry Goose. -16.2 was recorded at an elevation of 3,845 meters above sea level. Only 0.8 from the September national record. This is still preliminary. Elevation of 1,567 meters above sea level, -0.1 Celsius. Lowest temperature for mid-September in almost 30 years. So some very impressive cold in parts of France. Looking at Heathrow, we seen a temperature down this morning, down to 4.7 Celsius. It's the lowest temperature seen in the first half of September. There you go again, 1986. North Pole also had a minimum of 2.5. It is the coldest ever observed in the first half of September, prior to records beginning in 1985. So some very, very impressive temperatures. I think Benson dropped to 0 this morning down in Oxfordshire. By the way, this is an interesting one here. Remember I said to you a few days ago about somebody tweeting with regards to a 32 Celsius last Friday. Austrian Alps, 50 centimetres of snow falling and upwards of 2 metres of snow expected by Sunday. So this was the scene tweeted by Volcanic in the Austrian Alps. Considering just exactly 1 week ago today, it was 32 Celsius. So there you go, a very impressive Arctic outbreak. These are the sites that recorded 0 Celsius this morning, stretching from the Highlands all the way down to the south of Devon, parts of Northern Ireland, also recording an air frost this morning also. So very, very impressive chill for sure. This was also an interesting tweet here by Neil K. If it feels cold, if it feels like it is a bit cold at the moment here in the UK, this data viz shows that yesterday was the coldest day for the first half of September. So the 1st through the 15th since 1998. Don't think today is going to be much warmer. So you have to go back to 1998, the last time we had such a cool day during the first half of September. This is a tweet I put out last night, by the way. This was 24-hour temperature anomalies, so very, very cool anomalies across much of Western Europe, Northwestern Europe. Very warm anomalies over Eastern Europe, so that is a very... Don't get much of a bigger contrast than that, I must admit. This is the 48-hour contrast. This is the 72-hour contrast across Europe here. You can almost just draw a line right down the spine of the UK. So, I think that is it for today. I think I've spoken certainly long enough. Just finishing off, this was the scene from Ben McDowie in the Highlands I captured last night on my way down the A9. And no, I wasn't driving. I just want to emphasise that point. But fresh snow over the tops of the Cairngorms. The last time I seen that was mid-June. Wasn't actually that long ago when you think about that. So anyway, Tropical Outlook tomorrow, live stream on Sunday at 4 p.m. as usual. Leave a link in the description below. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your Friday and have a great weekend ahead. Bye for now.